Brian Epstein calls unexpected from heaven. John's tribute left audience in emotional silence. Madison Square Garden, December 17, 1974. 20,000 people, one microphone, and a secret John Lennon had buried for 7 years. The concert was electric. John was in rare form that night, his voice cutting through the New York air like a razor. He just finished a blistering version of his latest hit when something happened that nobody in that arena expected. The band was transitioning into the next song. The crowd was roaring. And then John Lennon stopped. Just stopped. He stood frozen at the microphone, staring at something in the audience that no one else could see. His face went pale. His hands began to shake. The guitar tech later said he looked like he'd seen a ghost. But this wasn't about ghosts. This was about guilt. "Hold on," John said into the microphone, his Liverpool accent suddenly thick, the way it got when emotion overtook him. "Just hold on a minute." The band stopped playing. The crowd went from cheering to confused murmuring. Something was wrong. Everyone could feel it. John walked to the edge of the stage, his eyes scanning the third row, center section. He pointed at someone, though most people couldn't see. "Who?" "You," John said, his voice barely above a whisper, but carrying through the arena's sound system. "The man in the gray suit. Stand up." In the third row, a man in his 50s, wearing an impeccable gray suit and round glasses, slowly stood. The resemblance was unmistakable. The same posture, the same gentle demeanor. The same careful way of dressing that Brian Epstein had possessed, but it wasn't Brian. Brian had been dead for 7 years, and John Lennon was about to tell 20,000 people why that death still haunted him every single day. New York City was freezing that December night. Madison Square Garden was packed beyond capacity. Tickets had sold out in 17 minutes. Everyone wanted to see John Lennon live, see the man who'd walked away from the Beatles 4 years earlier, see if he was different, broken, or transcendent. John had been living in New York for 2 years now, separated from Yoko during what he called his lost weekend period. He was drinking too much, recording sporadically, trying to find himself in a city that never slept and never judged. But tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight was supposed to be about redemption, about showing New York that John Lennon still had it, that he wasn't just a washed-up Beatle living off past glory. The concert had started perfectly. John was charming, funny, self-deprecating. He joked about his weight, about his accent, about his tumultuous relationship with America. The audience loved him. But now, standing at the edge of the stage, staring at a stranger who looked too much like Brian Epstein, John's carefully constructed facade was crumbling. "What's your name?" John asked the man in the gray suit. "David," the man replied, his voice carrying through the silent arena. "David Epstein." The arena gasped collectively. "Epstein, the same last name. Are you—" John couldn't finish the sentence. "Brian's cousin," David said quietly. "I never met you, Mr. Lennon. But Brian talked about you constantly. You were everything to him." John's knees buckled slightly. A crew member rushed forward, but John waved him away. 20,000 people watched John Lennon try not to fall apart. Hey, before we continue with this incredible story, I need to give you an important warning. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube has removed their subscriptions without notice. Just take a quick look at the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I don't want you to miss any of the exclusive content that's coming up. And while you're there, leave that powerful like that helps me a lot with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who is part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's interact. John turned away from David Epstein for a moment, trying to compose himself. But the dam had broken. 7 years of guilt, 7 years of wondering, 7 years of questions that would never be answered. When John turned back to face the audience, his eyes were wet. "Ladies and gentlemen," John said, his voice cracking, "I need to tell you something. something I've never said publicly, something that's been eating me alive since August 27th, 1967. The date hung in the air. Everyone knew that date. That was the day Brian Epstein died. Brian Epstein was our manager, John continued, pacing the stage now, unable to stand still. Everyone knows that. What they don't know is that Brian Epstein was the fifth Beatle, not because he played music, but because he believed in us when nobody else did. John stopped pacing and looked directly at David Epstein. Your cousin saved my life, multiple times. And I never told him. Not once. Not properly. The arena was so quiet you could hear the heating system humming. In 1961, Brian walked into the Cavern Club in Liverpool. We were nobody. 4 lads from Liverpool, playing rock and roll in a basement that smelled like cigarettes and broken dreams. Every record label in Britain had rejected us. Every single one. John's voice grew stronger now, the storyteller in him taking over. But Brian saw something. He was this posh, educated guy from a wealthy family, running his father's record store. He didn't need us, but he looked at 4 scruffy kids with bad haircuts and worse attitudes, and he saw possibility. John gestured to the band behind him. Brian taught us how to dress, how to bow after songs, how to smile at the press, even when they were tearing us apart. He fought for us, begged for us, mortgaged his future for us. A pause, and we took him for granted. The words landed like a punch. We mocked his accent, made fun of his manners, called him old-fashioned behind his back. We were kids, and we were cruel, and Brian just took it because he loved us. He genuinely loved us. John's voice dropped to almost a whisper. But there was something else, something Brian struggled with every day of his life, something that was illegal in Britain, something that could destroy his career, his reputation, his entire existence. The audience leaned forward collectively. Brian was gay, in a time and place where that was a crime, where police could arrest you for who you loved, where newspapers could ruin you with a single headline. John looked directly into the crowd. And we knew. Of course we knew. But did we protect him? Did we stand up for him when people whispered and judged? Did we tell him it was okay? That we didn't care? That he was family? Silence. No, we didn't. We stayed silent. Because it was easier. Because it was safer. Because we were cowards. John sat down on the edge of the stage now, legs dangling, microphone in hand. This wasn't a concert anymore. This was a confession. In 1967, everything was falling apart, John continued. The Beatles had stopped touring. We were locked in recording studios, fighting constantly. Paul wanted one thing. I wanted another. George was frustrated. Ringo was just trying to keep us together, John laughed bitterly. And Brian was drowning. We were so focused on our own drama that we didn't see it. Or maybe we saw it and chose to ignore it. He was lonely. Desperately lonely. He'd made us the biggest band in the world, but he couldn't share that success with anyone. Not really. A woman in the front row was crying. Brian had been in love with me, John said, his voice steady now. Everyone knew it. Not romantic love exactly. More than that. He loved all of us, but there was something about, look, I'm not going to pretend I understood it then. I was a stupid kid from Liverpool who thought toughness meant never showing emotion. John wiped his eyes. In the summer of 1967, we went to India with the Maharishi. Brian wanted to come with us. He begged to come. But we said no. We told him we needed space, needed to find ourselves, without management, without business, without pressure. The weight of that decision hung in the air. We left for India on August 24th, 1967. Brian went to his house in Sussex, alone. 3 days later, his butler found him dead. Accidental overdose, they said. Combination of sleeping pills and alcohol. John's voice hardened. Accidental. That's what they called it. That's what we let them call it. Because the alternative was too painful to consider. He stood up now, angry. Brian left no note, no explanation. Just a body in a bedroom and questions that would haunt us forever. Was it an accident? Was it intentional? Did he mean to take that many pills? Was he crying out for help that never came? John turned to face David Epstein directly. Your cousin died alone. While we were off finding spiritual enlightenment, Brian was finding the bottom of a pill bottle, and I have to live with that. Every single day. The arena felt smaller now. 20,000 people seemed to disappear, leaving only John Lennon and his guilt. I got the phone call in India, John said quietly. August 27th, early morning. Paul called me crying so hard I could barely understand him. Brian's dead, he kept saying. Brian's dead, and it's our fault. John's voice broke completely. We flew back to London immediately. The funeral was, I can't even describe it. His mother, Queenie, kept asking us what happened. Why was he alone, she kept saying. Why wasn't someone with him? A long pause. And I had no answer, because the truth was unforgivable. We'd abandoned him, not just that weekend, but for months. Years, maybe. We'd gotten so big, so successful, so consumed by our own importance that we'd forgotten the man who made it all possible. John walked back to the microphone stand. After Brian died, the Beatles died too. Not immediately, but the death sentence had been written. We tried to manage ourselves, and we were terrible at it. We fought constantly, made bad decisions, let in people who didn't have our best interests at heart. He looked out at the audience. The Beatles broke up because of a lot of reasons. Yoko gets blamed, Paul gets blamed, I get blamed. But the real reason is that we lost our anchor. We lost the one person who loved us enough to tell us when we were being idiots, who protected us from ourselves. John's voice grew softer, more intimate. I've never said this publicly, but I need to say it now. The last time I saw Brian alive, we had an argument. It was stupid. Something about money or schedules. I don't even remember. But I said something cruel. I told him he was becoming irrelevant, that we didn't need him anymore, that we'd outgrown him. The confession hung in the air like poison. I said that to a man who had given us everything, who had sacrificed his own dreams, his own life, his own happiness for ours. And those were the last words I ever spoke to him. John was crying openly now. When I got the news he was dead, the first thought that entered my mind was, did my words kill him? Did I push him toward those pills? Did my cruelty tip the balance? He looked at David Epstein. Your cousin died thinking we didn't love him. Died thinking he was irrelevant. Died alone in a house that was too big and too empty, while the boys he'd made into legends were off chasing the next high. John wiped his eyes and turned to his band. Boys, he said, I want to do something. Something I should have done 7 years ago. He looked back at the audience. Tonight, I want to sing a song, but I need your help. I need all of you to understand what this means. John picked up an acoustic guitar that a crew member brought out. This is for Brian Epstein, the man who believed in 4 idiots from Liverpool when nobody else would. The man who taught us that success without grace is worthless. The man who loved us unconditionally even when we didn't deserve it. He positioned the guitar. Brian, if you're somewhere out there listening, I'm sorry. I'm so deeply, profoundly sorry. For the words I said, for the words I didn't say, for not protecting you the way you protected us, for letting you die alone and afraid. The audience was transfixed. I know you loved music. I know you loved the theater. I know you loved beauty and elegance and art. So this is for you. What John sang next wasn't a rock song. It wasn't a political anthem. It was a simple, heartbreaking melody about love, loss, and regret. He sang about a man who gave everything and received silence in return. About the weight of expectations and the crushing loneliness of success. About how sometimes the people who save us are the ones we fail to save in return. 20,000 people listened in absolute silence. Many were crying, some were holding strangers. And David Epstein, sitting in the third row in his gray suit, looked so much like his cousin that for a moment everyone could almost believe Brian was there, finally hearing the words John had never said. When the song ended, John set down the guitar. "Thank you," he whispered to the audience, "for listening, for understanding, for being here." He looked at David Epstein one more time. "Your cousin was a great man. Tell his story. Make sure people remember him not as a footnote in Beatles history, but as the architect of dreams, as a man who loved bigger than his own pain." The standing ovation lasted 17 minutes. But John didn't smile. He just stood there, finally unburdened, finally honest, finally free from 7 years of silence. After the concert, John Lennon met with David Epstein backstage. The conversation lasted 2 hours. What they discussed, only they knew. But when David left Madison Square Garden that night, he was carrying something. A box of letters John had written to Brian over the years, but never sent. Apologies, confessions, words that were 7 years too late, but needed to be preserved. "Give these to Queenie," John said. "Brian's mother. Tell her I'm sorry I waited so long. David promised he would." The bootleg recordings of that night's concert became legendary among Beatles fans, not for the music, but for the rawness of John's confession. For the moment when one of the world's most famous men stripped away every defense and admitted his deepest regret. Critics called it the most honest performance in rock history. Fans called it the night John Lennon saved himself. But John himself never spoke about it again publicly. When asked about Brian Epstein in later interviews, he would simply say, "I said everything I needed to say that night in New York. Nothing more needs to be added." Brian Epstein's grave at the Kirkdale Jewish Cemetery in Liverpool began receiving more visitors after that concert. People left flowers, letters, photos. The forgotten fifth Beatle was finally being remembered. David Epstein later established a foundation in his cousin's name, providing support for young LGBTQ+ artists trying to break into the music industry. John Lennon was the first donor. Though he asked that his contribution remain anonymous, it wasn't. In 1980, shortly before his death, John Lennon gave one final interview about Brian Epstein. "People ask me if I have regrets," John said. "I have many, but the biggest is that I never told Brian he saved my life. Not just my career, my life. I was angry, violent, lost. Brian saw past all that. He believed in the person I could become." The interviewer asked if John thought Brian knew deep down how much he meant to the Beatles. John was quiet for a long moment. "I hope so," he finally said. "God, I hope so." But in his eyes was doubt. The kind of doubt that never fully heals. The kind that follows you from Liverpool to London to New York to eternity. Today, music historians point to that December night in 1974 as a turning point in how the industry treated LGBTQ+ artists and managers. John's public acknowledgement of Brian's sexuality and the discrimination he faced opened doors for conversations that had been locked for decades. But the real legacy wasn't in the industry. It was in the reminder that success without compassion is hollow. That fame without humanity is empty. That sometimes the people who build us up are the ones we forget to catch when they fall. Brian Epstein died at 32 years old, alone in a house in Sussex, while the boys he'd made into legends searched for enlightenment in India. His last thoughts, forever unknown. His final moments, forever private. But on December 17, 1974, in front of 20,000 witnesses, John Lennon made sure that Brian Epstein's legacy would never be forgotten. Not as a manager, not as a businessman, but as a human being who loved too much in a world that loved too little. And sometimes, that's the only tribute that matters. The question remains, in our own lives, who are we failing to honor while they're still here? Who are we taking for granted? Who will we spend the rest of our lives regretting we never thanked properly? Brian Epstein can't hear our apologies anymore, but someone in your life can. The call from heaven isn't supernatural. It's the voice inside reminding you. Tell them now, before silence becomes eternal. If this story of regret, redemption, and unspoken love moved you, subscribe to this channel. Hit that like button. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And in the comments, tell me, who in your life deserves to hear thank you before it's too late? Let's honor the Brian Epsteins in our own lives, today, not tomorrow.